Chapter 1, 86. Ethan Cole began counting, because the road had taught him not to trust distance. For 7 hours, the plains had kept sliding away from him without appearing to change. The same pale sky pressed down on the same fields, and every grain elevator on the horizon looked near enough to touch until 20 minutes passed, and it remained exactly where it had been. By the time he turned off County Road 9 and saw his grandfather's house, he wanted one fact that could be measured. He parked beside the sagging porch, carried his bag inside, and found Walter Cole asleep in an armchair with the television muttering to an empty room. Walter looked smaller than he had at the funeral in March. His wrists were thin, his cheeks rough with white stubble, and a purple bruise showed above the collar of his undershirt. "You fall again?" Ethan asked. Walter opened his eyes, but did not answer the question. "You came after dark. It is 8:30. Dark is dark." The old man pushed himself upright and looked past Ethan toward the front window. Beyond the glass, the porch light reached the gravel drive and died. The fields began immediately after that, black and flat, except where the wind moved through the new corn. Ethan followed his gaze. "What are you looking at?" "Nothing." Walter had said the same word on the telephone 2 nights earlier. Nothing had happened. Nothing was wrong. He only needed help repairing the north fence and getting the irrigation pump started before the county inspector came. Yet, he had called 3 times in one evening, and on the 3rd call, he had asked whether Ethan still owned the thermal camera he used for home inspections. Ethan had brought it. It was in the truck beneath a coil of extension cable. They ate canned soup in the kitchen. Walter complained about taxes, fertilizer prices, and the new deputy who drove too fast past the Methodist church. He did not mention the thermal camera. When Ethan asked about the bruise again, Walter raised one trembling hand and said, "Cupboard door." At 10, Ethan carried his bag upstairs to the bedroom that had once belonged to his mother. The wallpaper was still printed with tiny blue flowers. Her high school track medals hung from a nail behind the door, furred with dust. He opened the window to let out the trapped heat and heard a loose length of gutter tapping against the siding. That was when he saw the scarecrow. It stood in the north field where the corn ended near the old windbreak. Walter had never used scarecrows when Ethan was a child. He said birds were too smart to fear a shirt on a stick, and he preferred reflective tape and propane cannons. This one looked homemade. Its arms stretched from a crossbar beneath a brown coat. A feed sack formed the head. Even at that distance, Ethan could see a dark line where a mouth had been painted. He went downstairs. Walter was locking the back door. He checked the bolt twice, then pressed his shoulder against the wood as if testing it. "When did you put up the scarecrow?" Ethan asked. Walter went still. "North Field," Ethan said, "by the cottonwoods. It has been there." "Since when?" "Long enough." The old man's irritation arrived too quickly. Ethan watched him pull the curtain over the window and knew the conversation was over. He should have gone to bed. Instead, he stepped onto the porch with his phone flashlight and walked toward the field. The night smelled of wet soil and diesel fuel. Gravel cracked under his boots until he reached the edge of the lawn. He counted from there, not for any sensible reason, but because the figure seemed to change size whenever he looked down. 86 ordinary steps carried him to the first row of corn. The scarecrow stood another 30 yards beyond it, half surrounded by waist-high leaves. Ethan stopped. The painted face was turned toward the house. Its coat was too heavy for June. One sleeve hung lower than the other, and something pale showed at the wrist before the wind folded the cloth back over it. Ethan lifted his light, but the beam reached only a little way into the rows. A dry clicking sound came from the scarecrow's direction. He listened. The sound came again, 2 quick taps, a pause, then one more. It could have been stalks knocking together. It could have been an insect against a fence post. He told himself both possibilities while his body ignored them and tightened every muscle between his shoulders. Ethan, Walter's voice came from the porch behind him. The old man stood in the doorway holding a shotgun. He had not aimed it, but his finger rested inside the trigger guard. "Come back," Walter said. "I was just looking. Do not go into that field after dark." There was no anger in his voice now, only fear. Ethan walked back without counting. Walter locked the door after him and carried the shotgun to his bedroom. Upstairs, Ethan lay awake beneath a thin sheet. The gutter tapped. Corn whispered against corn. Once, near midnight, he heard a board creak on the porch below. He waited for another sound, but none came. In the morning, the scarecrow was 60 steps from the lawn. Chapter 2, 60. Ethan counted twice. He started at the same patch of dead grass beside the mailbox, placed his heel at the edge of the gravel, and walked toward the field with the stiff concentration of a man following instructions in a sobriety test. At 60, the toe of his boot touched a broken wooden stake wrapped in rusted wire. The scarecrow stood directly beyond it. In daylight, it looked less like a figure and more like badly assembled farm trash. The coat was stained with rain. Twine bound the sleeves to a splintered crossbar. The head was a seed sack stuffed into a hood, its eyes drawn as 2 upright black marks. The mouth was a thick curve that bent upward on one side. Ethan looked back at the house. From the second-floor window where he had stood the night before, the distance might have deceived him. The field had no fixed markers except rows and fence posts. He could have remembered the place incorrectly, but he had counted 86 steps to the first row. He was certain of that. He crouched beside the scarecrow's base. The support pole entered the soil at a shallow angle. Around it, the earth had been recently disturbed. A narrow groove ran behind the pole for 6 or 7 feet, as though something heavy had been dragged. then stopped. The groove ended among crushed leaves. "What are you doing?" Walter stood at the edge of the lawn in an old bathrobe and work boots. "It moved. Wind. The pole is 2 inches thick." Wind did not pull it out, drag it 25 steps, and plant it again. Walter turned his head toward the road. No car was coming. You counted. Last night and this morning. The old man closed his eyes. Ethan walked toward him. "You knew it was moving. I knew you would make trouble out of nothing. You asked me to bring a thermal camera. You were holding a shotgun because I walked toward it. That is not nothing." Walter pulled his robe tighter. "People come through here. Teenagers, hunters, men looking for copper. They think an old man cannot defend his place. Did someone threaten you?" "No." "Did you see somebody in the field?" "No." "Then why are you scared?" Walter's face hardened in the familiar way that had ended arguments for most of Ethan's childhood. "The north fence needs work. That is why you are here." He went inside and shut the door. Ethan photographed the scarecrow from 4 angles. He marked its base with orange survey paint, spraying a half circle on the soil and a line across the support pole. Then he took a length of mason's string from the truck, tied it around the pole, and ran it to a steel fence post 10 feet away. If the scarecrow moved again, the string would break or pull the knot. He spent the morning replacing fence staples along the north boundary. The work was simple enough to leave room for thought. Walter had been difficult all his life, but not secretive. He told offensive jokes at church dinners and argued with utility clerks over pennies. Shame had never seemed useful to him. Fear was even less familiar. Near noon, Ethan found a gap cut into the lower strands of barbed wire. The ends were clean and silver, not rusted. Someone had used bolt cutters recently, then bent the wire aside to create a narrow opening. Beyond the fence was county land, a drainage ditch, a strip of scrub, and an abandoned rail bed. A person could walk it for miles without passing a house. Ethan called the sheriff's office. The dispatcher said someone could come by that afternoon. Deputy Mara Holt arrived at 2:10 in a tan cruiser powdered with road dust. She was in her early 40s, broad-shouldered, with black hair twisted beneath a patrol cap. Walter watched from the porch while Ethan showed her the cut fence, the drag mark, and the photographs on his phone. "You have had trespassers before?" she asked Walter. "Everyone has trespassers. Anyone you have argued with, fired, reported. I do not hire any more." Mara looked at the scarecrow. "That yours?" Walter said nothing. Ethan answered. "He says it has been there." "Has it?" Walter's jaw worked. "A while." Mara walked out to inspect it. She tugged the support pole, examined the twine, and crouched over the orange paint. Could be kids, moving it at night to bother him. "That is what I thought," Ethan said. "But they cut the fence from the outside. Kids can own cutters. He is afraid of it. Walter turned toward the house. I am afraid of wasting daylight. Mara let him go. When he was out of hearing, she lowered her voice. Has he been confused lately? Not that I know of. Any memory problems, falls, medication changes. Ethan looked at the bruise above Walter's collar. He says he hit a cupboard. Mara wrote something in a small notebook. I will drive the rail bed. You should install cameras and motion lights. Do not confront anyone. Call us if you see a person, not a coat on a pole. She left at 3. Walter remained in his room until supper. That evening, Ethan mounted 2 battery cameras beneath the eaves. One faced the north field. The other watched the back door and fuel tanks. He checked both feeds from his phone, then set the thermal camera on the kitchen table. Walter noticed it while carrying his plate to the sink. Put that away, he said. Why? It will not show you anything you want to see. What do you think it will show? Walter stared at him for several seconds. Then he turned off the kitchen light, leaving Ethan in darkness, except for the green numbers on the stove clock. At 1:17 a.m., the field camera sent a motion alert. Ethan sat up in bed and opened the feed. For 2 seconds, the image showed pale corn and the darker shape of the scarecrow beyond it. Then the picture filled with gray static. In the static, something struck the camera, housing 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. Chapter 3, The Line in the Dirt. The camera was still attached to the eave in the morning, but its lens had been covered with mud. Ethan climbed a ladder and removed the unit. The mud formed a deliberate thumbprint across the glass. No branch reached that part of the house. A person would have needed the ladder, a long pole, or the ability to stand on the narrow steel rim of the rain barrel below it. The second camera had recorded nothing. Its view of the back door showed empty gravel from midnight until dawn. Walter sat at the kitchen table, peeling an apple with a pocket knife. The peel came away in one unbroken red spiral. Someone touched the camera, Ethan said. Then by a taller ladder. I am calling the deputy again and telling her what dirt happened. Ethan set the camera on the table. The scarecrow moved. The fence was cut. Now someone climbed the house. You are going to tell me who you think it is. The knife stopped. There was a man named Thomas Kearns, Walter said. It was so direct that Ethan did not speak. Walter resumed peeling. He worked here one summer, long time ago. He stole diesel, tools, whatever he could carry. I fired him. He came back angry. How long ago? 99. 27 years ago. Some men hold things. Is Thomas Kearns alive? Walter cut the apple in half. He left the county. How do you know? People saw him go. The answer was too practiced. Ethan pulled out his phone and searched the name. The signal at the farm was weak, and the county newspaper's archive loaded in pieces. He found a scanned article from July 1999. Local farmhand sought after truck found abandoned. The photograph showed a lean man of 38 with close-set eyes and a dark mustache. Thomas Kearns had last been seen leaving a tavern in Pike Hollow. His pickup was discovered 3 days later near the state line. Authorities suspected he had fled after stealing equipment from his employer. The employer was not named in the article. "They thought he stole from you," Ethan said. Walter placed the apple halves on a plate. "He did steal from me. His truck was found without him. I told you he left. Did you report the theft?" "Sheriff handled it." "Which sheriff?" "Lennox." The name returned another childhood memory. Sheriff Dean Lennox, sitting at Walter's dining table during Thanksgiving, his brown uniform shirt open at the throat, laughing while Ethan's mother washed dishes. Lennox had died of a heart attack when Ethan was in college. His son, Clay, now owned a grain transport company and served on the county commission. "What does Kearns have to do with the scarecrow?" Ethan asked. Walter folded the peel into his palm. "Nothing. You asked who might have hated me. Would his family come here? His wife moved away. There was a boy." "How old?" 14, maybe. Ethan searched again. He found no useful results for the son. The name Benjamin Kearns appeared in an old school wrestling roster, then disappeared from the local record. Outside, the survey paint around the scarecrow remained unbroken. The string was taut. For the first time since Ethan arrived, the figure had not moved. That should have reassured him. Instead, it felt like evidence that whoever had entered the yard understood the markers and wanted him to know they understood. He spent the afternoon installing motion lights. Walter remained close, pretending to repair a hinge while watching the field. At 4, a pickup slowed on the county road. The driver wore sunglasses and a white cap. He looked toward the house, then accelerated. "Who was that?" Ethan asked. "Could not see," but Walter had lowered his head before the truck passed. At sunset, the wind died. The corn stopped moving. The scarecrow stood inside its orange line, with both arms extended, its crooked smile pale in the last light. Ethan placed a kitchen chair beside the front window. He set the thermal camera on the sill, checked the shotgun Walter had finally allowed him to unload, and waited. The thermal camera was a compact device made to identify missing insulation, water intrusion, and overheated electrical panels. It did not see through walls. It measured surface temperature and displayed differences as blocks of color. A warm body behind a thin curtain could sometimes appear as a vague shape, but a person inside a heavy coat would be harder to distinguish at distance. At 11:40, Walter came downstairs. "Go to bed," he said. "No, you have always liked proving people wrong, and you have always liked making that necessary." Walter sat on the sofa. For nearly an hour, neither spoke. At 12:36, the motion light over the fuel tanks came on. The yard flared white. Nothing moved between the tanks. Ethan checked the camera feed. Empty gravel. The light went out. At 12:52, the back porch light came on. At 1:04, the north eave light came on. Each activation moved around the house in a slow, clockwise path, as though someone were testing the sensors one by one. Ethan raised the thermal camera to the window. The yard appeared in deep blue and violet. The porch posts glowed faintly from the day's stored heat. The field was almost black. The scarecrow was gone. "Walter," Ethan whispered. The old man leaned forward. A shape crossed the thermal screen near the windbreak. It moved low, below the corn tops, then vanished. Ethan adjusted the range and swept back. The scarecrow stood 42 steps from the lawn. He could see the orange paint mark far behind it. The coat was a cold blue outline. The sack head was colder still. Inside the chest, beneath layers of cloth and straw, a red shape pulsed with human heat. Chapter 4: Heat. Ethan did not remember opening the front door. One moment, he was staring at the thermal screen, and the next, he was on the porch with Walter's unloaded shotgun in his hands, while the motion light flooded the field. Walter seized his shoulder from behind. "Get inside. There is someone in it." "I know." The admission struck harder than the fear. Ethan turned. "You know." The scarecrow's head tilted. It was a small movement, almost polite. The sack face leaned a few degrees to the left, and the painted mouth appeared to deepen on one side. Ethan raised the shotgun before remembering it was empty. The figure dropped. It did not topple like a pole. Its knees folded beneath the coat. A human shape sank between the rows and disappeared. Ethan ran forward. Walter shouted his name. The motion light clicked off, plunging the field into darkness. Ethan switched on his phone light and reached the first row. Leaves struck his face. The beam showed narrow sections of soil, green stalks, and nothing else. Something moved to his right. He turned and saw the brown coat slide between two rows 15 feet away. A shoulder, then an elbow. The person inside moved quickly on hands and knees, using the plants as cover. Ethan pushed through after it. The shotgun snagged on leaves. He abandoned it and ran with both hands raised before his face. The rows seemed to close behind him. Every sound came from every direction. His boots hitting dirt, his breath, the slap of leaves, the dry rattle of something moving ahead. Then the ground vanished. He fell into a drainage furrow, struck his knee, and lost his phone. The light spun once and landed face up, illuminating the underside of the corn. Ethan rolled onto his back. A pair of boots stopped at the edge of the light. They were old black work boots wrapped at the ankles with cloth. Above them hung the hem of the scarecrow's coat. Ethan froze. The figure stood no more than 6 feet away. Its face remained in shadow. A smell reached him: sweat, damp wool, and the sweet chemical odor of machine oil. The figure raised one hand. Straw had been tied along the sleeve, but the fingers were bare. A man's fingers, scarred knuckles, dirt beneath the nails. He pointed toward the house. Then he pressed one finger to the painted mouth. A gunshot split the night. The figure jerked and ran. Walter fired again from somewhere behind Ethan. The muzzle flash lit the corn in a white blink. Stalks snapped as the intruder crashed north. "Stop shooting," Ethan shouted. The third shot did not come. He found his phone and climbed from the furrow. Walter stood at the edge of the field, holding the shotgun against his shoulder. He had loaded it while Ethan was outside. His face looked gray in the porch light. "Did you hit him?" Ethan asked. "No, you could have hit me. I knew where you were. You could not see anything." Walter lowered the gun. "He was standing over you." Ethan called 911. Deputy Holt arrived with 2 other officers and a tracking dog. They searched the field until 3:30. The dog followed a scent north through the cut fence and down the drainage ditch, then lost it on the abandoned rail bed. Officers found pieces of straw, a strip of brown wool, and a depression where someone had lain beneath the corn. They did not find blood. The scarecrow's wooden frame remained in the field. The coat and sack head were gone. Mara interviewed them separately in the kitchen. Ethan told her everything, including the human heat inside the coat and Walter's words. "I know." When she questioned Walter, the old man denied saying it. "Maybe he meant he knew after he saw it move," Mara said later. "He knew before. He is frightened. Frightened people say inaccurate things. He told me about Thomas Cairns." Mara stopped writing. It was a slight hesitation, but Ethan saw it. "You know the name," he said. "Everybody who grew up here knows it." "Do they know he worked for my grandfather?" "Some do. The newspaper did not mention him." Mara closed her notebook. "Old reports are not always complete. Can you pull the report?" "I can request it." "Request it from whom?" "You are the sheriff's office. Records before 2005 are stored at the courthouse, and not all of them were digitized." "I will look." She stood. "Until we identify this person, both of you should leave. Stay at a motel in Pike Hollow. I will arrange extra patrols." Walter refused immediately. Mara looked at Ethan, then convinced him. After the officers left, dawn colored the eastern horizon. Walter swept broken glass from the porch, where one of his shots had struck the old storm window. "Tell me why he pointed at the house," Ethan said. Walter kept sweeping. "Was he telling me to look for something? Was he telling me to take you inside?" The broom stopped. "Or was he telling me where he was going next?" Walter's hands tightened around the handle. "You should leave." "Not without you. I did not ask you to save me." "No, you asked me to bring a thermal camera." For the first time, Walter looked ashamed. "I wanted to know whether it was a man," he said. "And now you know." Walter stared toward the north field, where the bare wooden cross stood against the morning sky. No, he said. Now I know which man. Chapter 5. Thomas Cairns. Walter would not say the name again. He packed no bag, refused the motel, and spent the morning replacing the shattered storm window as though the attack had been weather. When Ethan blocked the toolshed door and demanded an explanation, Walter walked around the building and entered through the other side. Ethan called Mara. She did not answer. He left a message, then drove into Pike Hollow to buy more cameras, padlocks, and a box of shotgun shells he hoped they would not use. The town consisted of 6 blocks, a water tower, and a courthouse built from red stone that held the day's heat. The county library occupied the former bank beside the post office. Ethan entered because the online archive had stopped at 2001, and because he no longer trusted Walter's version of anything. The librarian, Mrs. Pelham, remembered him from summers at the farm. She remembered his mother more clearly. Laura hated this place, she said with cheerful certainty. No offense. None taken. Why did she hate it? Mrs. Pelham glanced toward the reading room. Ask a smaller question. Ethan asked about Thomas Cairns. Her smile disappeared. She led him to a microfilm machine in the back. The local paper had published 6 articles about the disappearance. The first called Thomas a missing person. The second emphasized his history of petty theft. The third reported that tools and 2 fuel cans were missing from Walter Cole's farm. By the fourth, the sheriff's office described Thomas as a fugitive suspect. His wife, Angela, insisted he would never abandon their son. The 5th article appeared 3 weeks later. It quoted Sheriff Dean Lennox. All available evidence indicates Mr. Cairns left voluntarily to avoid prosecution. The 6th was a short notice from the following spring. Angela Cairns had sold her house and moved to Missouri with 14-year-old Benjamin. Ethan searched later editions. Nothing. There was more, Mrs. Pelham said behind him. He turned. She carried a folder of newspaper clippings. Not printed. Talk. People said Thomas was sleeping with someone's wife. Others said he found something he should not have found. What kind of thing? Sheriff Lennox had businesses outside the law. Gambling rooms, stolen machinery, protection money. Everyone knew. Knowing and proving are different animals. Was my grandfather involved? Mrs. Pelham set the folder down carefully. Walter was involved in Walter. If trouble did not cost him money, he ignored it. If it did cost him money, he found a way to make it stop. She showed Ethan a photograph from the county fair in 1998. Walter stood beside Sheriff Lennox and 3 other men near a livestock pavilion. Thomas Cairns was visible in the background, carrying a crate. Beside him stood a thin teenage boy with long hair. The boy looked directly at the camera. On the back, someone had written names. The boy was Benjamin. Do you know what happened to him? Ethan asked. He came back once. When? 10 or 12 years ago. He asked questions at the tavern, asked where his father had worked, where Lennox used to hunt, whether the old irrigation tunnels still ran beneath the coal place. Ethan felt a cold pressure behind his ribs. What tunnels? Mrs. Pelham looked surprised. Your grandfather never showed you. Before modern pivots and pumps, the North Field had been irrigated through buried concrete channels connected to a holding cistern. Most had collapsed in the 70s. One access house remained near the cottonwoods, hidden beneath brush. Ethan thanked her and went to the courthouse. The records clerk found no Thomas Kieran's file in the public cabinets. She searched an index and frowned. Box 14C, she said. Transferred to sheriff storage in 2006. Can I request it? Through the sheriff. Outside, Ethan saw a white pickup parked across the street. The driver wore sunglasses and a white cap. It was the same truck that had passed the farm. Ethan walked toward it. The pickup pulled away from the curb, circled the courthouse, and accelerated south. He photographed the license plate, but dust obscured 2 digits. When he returned to the farm, Walter was sitting on the porch with the shotgun across his knees. Where is the access house? Ethan asked. Walter's eyes shifted toward the north field. Benjamin Kieran's came back looking for the irrigation tunnels, Ethan said. He asked about this farm. Town gossip. I saw his photograph. He would be 41 now. The man in the field moved like that age. A photograph from 30 years ago tells you that. No, your face tells me. Walter stood with effort. Leave it alone. You brought me here. That was a mistake. Then tell me what happened to Thomas. Walter carried the shotgun inside. Ethan followed, but stopped in the doorway. On the kitchen table lay the orange survey string he had tied to the scarecrow. It had been cut into 86 equal pieces. Chapter 6, 86 pieces. Ethan counted the pieces because whoever cut them expected him to. They were arranged in 8 rows on the kitchen table. 10 in each of the first 8 rows, 6 in the last. Every length was roughly the width of 2 fingers. The cuts were clean and square. Walter stood in the doorway, staring at the orange fragments. Did you do this? Ethan asked. No. Was the house locked? I was outside. For how long? Long enough to fix a window. Ethan checked the doors. The front and back showed no damage. 3 windows were unlocked, including the one above the kitchen sink. The screen on that window had been removed and replaced. 2 screws lay on the exterior sill, aligned head to head. Nothing obvious was missing. Whoever entered had crossed the room, cut the string, arranged it, and left without touching the cash jar beside the refrigerator or Walter's wallet on the counter. Ethan called Mara again. This time she answered. Do not touch anything else, she said. I am coming. Walter went to his bedroom. Ethan heard drawers opening, then the metallic slide of a gun case. He followed, and found the old man kneeling beside the bed with a black revolver in his lap. "How many guns are in this house?" Ethan asked. "Enough. That is not an answer. It is the only one you need." Ethan took the revolver before Walter could object. It was loaded. The hammer was down, but the cylinder contained 6 cartridges green with age. These could misfire, or they could work. "You nearly shot me last night." Walter rose, one hand on the mattress. "I saved you. You put me in the field with a man you recognized and did not warn me. I was not sure. You said you knew which man." Walter's gaze moved to the window. Benjamin had his father's shoulders. It was the first time he had spoken the name without being forced. "Why would Benjamin come after you?" "Because his mother filled his head with lies." "What lies?" "That Thomas would not leave them. That someone killed him." "Did someone?" Walter's lips tightened. Ethan placed the revolver on a high shelf in the closet. "Mara is going to ask you the same thing. Then I will give her the same answer." "Which is no answer." Walter sat on the bed. For a moment, he looked too tired to be stubborn. "There are answers that do not improve anything. They might keep us alive. You think truth protects people because you have lived where truth is paperwork. Out here, truth is a tool. The man holding it decides what it is for." Mara arrived with a crime scene kit and photographed the table. She lifted partial prints from the window frame, the scissors block, and one piece of string. Most would belong to Ethan or Walter. She bagged several fragments and asked Walter to describe his movements that morning. He lied twice in the first minute. He said he had not entered the north field, though mud on his boots matched the dark soil between the rows. He said the kitchen window had been locked, though its latch was bent and could not catch. Mara ended the interview and asked Ethan to walk outside. "He is obstructing," Ethan said as soon as the door closed. "He is frightened and old. Those are not legal exemptions." "No, but they matter when I decide whether to put him in a room and make him shut down completely." She showed him a printed photograph. It was Benjamin Kearns's driver's license from Missouri, issued 8 years earlier. The face was thinner than Thomas's, the nose longer. A scar crossed the left eyebrow. Height, 6 feet 1. Weight, 187 pounds. "No renewals after this," Mara said. His last listed address was a rented house outside Joplin. He was evicted. He has arrests for trespass, burglary, stalking, and assault, but only one felony conviction. Served 3 years for breaking into a contractor's home and waiting for him in the attic. Was the contractor connected to his father? Not that I can tell. Benjamin claimed the man owed his family money. Is there a warrant? Failure to appear on a weapons charge. Missouri authorities have been looking for him since 2021. Then this is enough to search the farm. It is enough to search places your grandfather permits us to search. It is not enough to tear open buildings without a warrant. Ethan told her about the irrigation access house. Mara looked toward the cottonwoods. Walter mentioned tunnels to you. Never. He mentioned them to my father once. Your father knew him. My father was a deputy under Lennox. Half the county knew him. She did not elaborate. They persuaded Walter to sign a consent form covering the house, barns, outbuildings, and fields. He refused to include underground structures. There are no structures underground, he said. Mara turned the page so he could read the wording. Then, including them costs you nothing. Walter pushed the clipboard away. The refusal changed something in her expression. At dusk, Mara left to request a warrant. Ethan installed door braces and moved a bookshelf in front of the unlocked kitchen window. He placed the cameras where they could watch one another. Walter sat at the table among the missing orange pieces, eating crackers without appetite. What is under the field? Ethan asked. Concrete and mud. What else? Walter bit a cracker and chewed slowly. Regret if you dig far enough. At 11:48, every camera went offline at once. The house lights remained on. The wireless router showed a signal. Ethan checked the exterior through the windows and saw nothing. Then the printer in Walter's small office began to run. One sheet slid into the tray. It contained a single sentence in large black letters. You miscounted. Chapter 7, 19. The printer was not wireless. Ethan traced the cable from its back to Walter's desktop computer. The machine had been asleep. Its screen lit when he touched the mouse, displaying an empty document and a blinking cursor. No file appeared in the recent history. The printer queue was blank. Someone could have accessed the computer remotely, but the internet connection was too weak for anything sophisticated. More likely, Ethan thought, the intruder had installed something during the kitchen break-in or had entered the house again. He searched every room with Walter behind him carrying the shotgun. Closets, attic, basement, pantry, shower curtains. Ethan checked beneath beds and inside the cedar chest that held his grandmother's winter clothes. The house contained 100 places where a sound could hide, but no person. In the basement, he noticed cold air moving across his ankle. A shelf of canned vegetables covered the foundation wall. When he pulled it aside, the concrete behind it appeared intact, except for a rectangular repair near the floor. Fresh dust lay beneath one edge. What is this? Ethan asked. Walter shone his flashlight over the patch. Old coal chute, filled before you were born. Ethan pressed his palm to it. The mortar was cold. There is air coming through. Basement's leak. He fetched a pry bar. Walter stepped between him and the wall. Not tonight. Why not? Because if he wants you staring at the basement, he is somewhere else. The reasoning was sound enough to be frightening. They stayed awake until dawn. The cameras returned at 2:06 without explanation. The field feed showed empty rows. At sunrise, Ethan found a short section of coaxial cable hanging from the telephone junction box. Someone had clipped it, then reconnected it with a coupler. A small black device had been attached beneath the box. It contained a battery, a radio transmitter, and a relay capable of interrupting the camera network. Mara bagged it when she arrived with the warrant. "Commercial parts," she said, "assembled by someone who understands basic electronics." Benjamin was an electrician. Construction labor, maintenance, roofing, farm work. Enough to learn. 2 deputies searched the house, while Mara and Ethan walked to the north field. Walter followed until Mara ordered him to remain on the porch. The scarecrow had returned. It stood 19 steps from the lawn. No one had seen it in the growing light. One moment the field appeared empty. The next, Ethan found it at the end of a row, close enough that he could distinguish individual stitches in the sack face. The coat was different. This one was gray and narrow through the shoulders. A red scarf had been tied around the neck. The painted eyes were horizontal now, like closed cuts. A photograph was pinned to its chest. Mara put on gloves and removed it. The image showed Walter at approximately 45, standing beside Sheriff Lennox and Thomas Kearns near the farm's diesel tanks. Walter held an envelope. Thomas held a metal cash box. The photograph had been taken from inside a vehicle. The lower edge of a windshield was visible. On the back, someone had written a date: June 18, 1999. Thomas disappeared on June 21. "Recognize the box?" Mara asked. Ethan did. Walter still used it for property deeds and tax receipts. It was stored beneath the floorboards in his bedroom closet, a hiding place he had once shown Ethan's mother during a tornado warning. They went back to the house. The floorboard had been pried up. The cash box remained, but its contents had been disturbed. Deeds, insurance papers, and savings bonds lay in no order. A narrow, dust-free rectangle showed where something had been removed. Walter stood in the doorway. "What was there?" Mara asked. "Nothing. Something was in this box. Old papers." "What papers?" "Receipts." "For what?" Walter lowered himself into a chair. "Diesel." Mara held up the photograph. Thomas Kearns was carrying this box 3 days before he vanished. What was inside then? Walter's eyes moved to Ethan. "Tell her," Ethan said. "Cash," Walter answered. "How much?" Mara asked. 30,000. Even Mara showed surprise. In 1999, the sum would have been more than Walter earned in a good year. "Where did it come from?" she asked. "Lennox." "Why did he give it to you?" Walter looked at the photograph for a long time. "To hold." "For what?" "He moved money through businesses. Cash that did not belong in banks. Sometimes he needed it somewhere quiet." "You stored criminal proceeds for Sheriff Lennox." "I stored a box. Thomas knew. He found it." "Did he take money?" "Yes." "How much?" 5,000, maybe more. Did Lennox confront him? Walter rubbed both hands across his face. Thomas said he had copied the numbers from the ledgers, said he knew which contractors paid Lennox and where stolen equipment went. He wanted 10,000 to leave the county. Blackmail, Mara said. That was the word Lennox used. And what did you do? Walter did not answer. A deputy called from downstairs. He had opened the patched coal chute. Behind the thin concrete facing was a cavity large enough for a man to crawl through. It extended beneath the porch and connected to an old brick drainage conduit leading north. The dust inside held fresh handprints. On the first brick, written with a carpenter's pencil, was the number 19. Chapter 8, Under the Field. The conduit was 30 inches high and less than 3 feet wide. Mara went first in coveralls, a respirator, and a helmet with a lamp. Ethan followed after signing a statement that he understood the risks and against the advice of every deputy present. The county did not have a confined space team, and the nearest technical rescue unit was 90 miles away. Waiting would give Benjamin time to erase whatever remained. The brick tunnel descended beneath the north field. Mud covered its floor. Roots pushed through the ceiling in pale clusters. Every 20 feet, the passage widened around a junction where feeder channels had once carried water to the rows. Ethan could see evidence of recent use almost immediately. Scraped mortar, boot marks, a candy wrapper pressed into mud. Sections where a blanket had been laid to soften sharp brick. An electrical wire ran along the ceiling, fixed with plastic clips. He powered the relay from here, Ethan said. Mara touched the wire, but did not cut it. Or powered something else. The air smelled of mold and kerosene. Behind them, a deputy remained at the opening with a radio. The signal weakened as they crawled farther. At 70 yards, the conduit reached a concrete chamber beneath the old access house. Ethan stood slowly, his back cracking, and swept his lamp across curved walls. Rusted valves protruded from the floor. A ladder rose to a steel hatch covered by soil and weeds. Someone had made the chamber habitable. A camp cot stood against one wall. Shelves held canned food, bottled water, batteries, tools, and folded clothing. A propane stove sat beneath a vent pipe. There were maps of the farm, printed satellite images, and photographs taken through the house windows. Ethan approached the photographs. Walter asleep in his chair. Walter carrying groceries from the truck. Walter kneeling at his wife's grave. Ethan himself appeared in the most recent images. One showed him at a gas station 2 counties east on the day he drove to the farm. Another showed his apartment building in Wichita. A third showed him through his living room window, reading on the sofa. He was watching before Walter called me, Ethan said. Mara photographed everything before touching it. Or he knew Walter would call you. A corkboard above the cot displayed index cards connected by string. Dates vehicle descriptions, work schedules. Walter's name appeared in the center. Ethan's was to one side. Clay Lennox's name appeared on the other. Beneath Clay's card, Benjamin had written, "Second liar." "Clay is involved," Ethan said. "Maybe, or Cairns thinks he is." A shallow metal tray contained charcoal sticks, needles, black thread, and scraps of feed sack. 3 finished scarecrow faces were stacked nearby. Each had a different expression. One smiled, one frowned, one had no mouth. Mara opened a plastic storage bin. Inside were wallets, keys, watches, and identification cards belonging to 6 people. None was Walter. None was Ethan. "This is not only about your grandfather," she said. One driver's license belonged to a contractor from Joplin, whose home Benjamin had entered. Another belonged to a Missouri woman reported missing in 2022. Ethan recognized her face from a news poster, though he could not remember the name. Mara radioed for state investigators and backup. Static answered. A soft metallic sound came from the feeder tunnel to their right. Both turned. The passage was dark, beyond 10 feet. Mara drew her pistol and ordered Ethan behind the valve assembly. "Sheriff's office," she called. "Come out with your hands visible." No answer. The sound came again, closer, metal touching concrete. A soup can rolled from the darkness. It crossed the chamber floor and stopped beside Mara's boot. A wire trailed from the can into the tunnel. "Down," Ethan shouted. Mara kicked the can away. A sharp crack filled the chamber, followed by a burst of white powder and sparks. Not an explosive, Ethan realized through the ringing in his ears, but a flash charge made from fireworks. The lamps went out. Someone struck him from behind. He fell against the valve assembly. A forearm pressed across his throat. The attacker smelled of machine oil. Ethan drove his elbow backward and felt it connect with ribs. The pressure loosened. Mara fired once into the ceiling. The muzzle flash revealed the attacker in fragments. Black boots, gray coat, sack mask. The scarecrow man shoved Ethan forward and vanished into the feeder tunnel. Mara's backup lamp came on. Blood ran from a cut above her ear. She aimed into the passage, but did not fire again. "He took my radio," she said. Ethan touched his neck. The skin burned where a cord or rough sleeve had dragged across it. On the floor lay a narrow wooden ruler marked with black ink. The first line read 86. The second read 60. The third read 42. The fourth read 19. Below it, in fresh ink, Benjamin had written 12. A distant crash came from the access ladder. By the time Mara reached the hatch, it had been chained from outside. They returned through the conduit to the basement. Halfway back, Ethan's lamp found a message scratched into the brick where no message had been before. WALTER KNOWS, where MY father is. Chapter 9, The Missing Box. State investigators arrived before noon. and sealed the farm with yellow tape. They recovered fingerprints, fibers, hair, and enough personal property from the underground chamber to connect Benjamin Kearns to at least 4 burglaries and 2 unresolved disappearances. None of it proved where he had gone. The feeder tunnels divided beneath the field like roots. 2 had collapsed. One ended at a rusted grate near the drainage ditch. The grate had been cut and fitted with removable bolts. Benjamin could enter from the abandoned rail bed, travel under the corn, and reach the house through the old coal chute without crossing a camera's view. He had transformed Walter's property into a structure with no secure room. Mara's cut required 7 stitches. She returned from the clinic that afternoon with a bandage above her ear and anger stripped of patience. "Your grandfather is done deciding what matters," she told Ethan. "I am bringing him in." Walter sat at the kitchen table while 2 state agents questioned him. He admitted storing money for Lennox, but continued to deny knowing what happened to Thomas. He claimed the missing item from the cash box was an old tax ledger. He could not explain why Benjamin wanted it. Mara received a call and stepped onto the porch. When she returned, she asked Ethan to join her outside. "The archived Kearns report is missing," she said. "Missing from the courthouse. The transfer index shows box 14C went to sheriff storage in 2006. Storage inventory shows it was checked out in 2012 and never returned. By whom? The signature is my father's." Ethan waited. Mara looked across the field. Ray Holt served under Lennox for 18 years. After Lennox died, my father spent 1 term as sheriff. He retired in 2014. Can you ask him about the file? He died last winter. I am sorry. She acknowledged the words with a small nod. I handled his house. There were boxes of case materials in the garage. I took them to the office. I do not remember 14C. Would he have protected Lennox? When I was 10, I watched my father arrest his own cousin for beating a man outside a bar. I believed that answered every question about him. It does not. A convoy of vehicles approached on the county road. The first was a black SUV. Behind it came a white pickup, the pickup that had watched Ethan at the courthouse. Clay Lennox stepped from the SUV wearing pressed jeans and a blue button-down shirt. He was 56, heavy through the chest, with his father's pale eyes. The white pickup's driver remained behind the wheel, sunglasses hiding his face. Clay showed an agent his county identification and walked toward Mara. I heard you found a camp under the coal place, he said. This is an active scene. County Emergency Management asked whether you need excavation equipment. We will make a formal request. Clay saw Ethan, Laura's boy. Ethan, I remember. You used to fish the drainage pond. Your father used to store money here. Mara said Ethan's name as a warning, but Clay only smiled. My father did business with a lot of farmers. He loaned cash when banks would not. Different time. Thomas Kearns called it blackmail money. The smile remained, but Clay's eyes changed. Thomas Kearns was a thief. That is what your father printed in the paper. That is what evidence showed. The evidence is missing. Clay looked at Mara. Is that true? You should leave. I asked if you need county resources. And I answered. The white pickup's driver opened his door. He was younger than Clay, perhaps 30, with a shaved head and tattooed forearms. He did not approach. He watched the tunnels, the investigators, and Walter through the kitchen window. Who is he? Ethan asked. My operations manager, Curtis Vale, Clay said. He drove this road because someone has been stealing fuel from our trucks. Maybe your scarecrow man. He watched me at the courthouse. Curtis watches everybody. It is why I pay him. Clay returned to the SUV. Before entering, he turned back to Ethan. Your mother knew when to leave this place. You should learn from her. The vehicles departed. Mara recorded the license plates. That was not a confession, she said. It was not friendly advice. No. Inside, an agent carried a sealed evidence bag from Walter's bedroom. It contained a small brass key found taped beneath the cash box. Walter stared at it as though it were a live insect. What does it open? Mara asked. He said nothing. The agent had also found a receipt tucked inside an old Bible. It came from a private storage facility in Wichita. Unit 311 had been prepaid in cash through the end of the month. The missing ledger, Ethan said. Walter looked at him. Not a ledger. Then what? Insurance. A sound came from the front window. Tap, tap, tap. Every person in the kitchen turned. No one stood on the porch. The glass was empty, except for 3 fresh spots of mud arranged at eye level. While agents had searched the house and police surrounded the property, someone had come close enough to touch the window. Chapter 10:12. The scarecrow appeared at sunset, 12 steps from the porch. It stood in the vegetable garden among tomato cages, close enough to trigger the motion light. The gray coat had been replaced with Walter's green work jacket, stolen from the mudroom. The sack head wore Walter's seed company cap. Around its neck hung a cardboard sign, Open 311. 2 state troopers searched the garden and surrounding rows. They found a narrow trail through the corn, but it ended at one of the feeder tunnel vents. Benjamin had set the figure in place without entering the open yard. Mara wanted to transport Walter to a protected location. Walter refused until she threatened to arrest him for obstruction. Then he agreed to leave only after visiting the storage unit. That is exactly where Benjamin wants us, Ethan said. He already knows about it, Mara replied. Keeping it closed does not make it safe. They drove to Wichita in separate vehicles after dark. A state agent rode with Walter. Ethan followed Mara's cruiser while another unmarked car trailed them. They changed routes twice and watched for the white pickup. It did not appear. The storage facility occupied a converted warehouse near the freight yards. Security cameras covered the entrance, elevators, and hallways. The manager confirmed no one had accessed Unit 311 in 9 months. Walter used the brass key. The unit was 5 feet square and nearly empty. A steel chair stood in the center. On it rested a red metal toolbox. "Is that yours?" Mara asked. Walter nodded. The toolbox contained no tools. Inside were 3 bound notebooks, a cassette recorder, 4 tapes, and a sealed envelope addressed to Laura Cole. Ethan recognized his mother's name in Walter's block handwriting. "She knew?" he asked. "Not all of it. Why is there a letter for her?" Walter stared at the envelope. "Because I thought I would die before she did." Laura had died of pancreatic cancer 2 years earlier. Walter had not attended the last week in hospice. He claimed the drive was too long. Ethan picked up the envelope. "Evidence first," Mara said gently. They photographed the contents in place. The notebooks contained handwritten accounts of payments Sheriff Lennox received between 1996 and 2000. Names of contractors, stolen equipment dealers, illegal gambling operators, and county employees filled the pages. Besides several entries, Walter had written locations where cash had been hidden. One entry was dated June 18, 1999. DL left 30,000. TK saw box. Took 5,000. Says COPIES made. DL will handle Monday. The next entry was dated June 21. TK came 9:40. DL and RH10:05. Argument North Pump. Shot 10:31. MOVED truck 120. Buried before sunrise. Mara read the initials twice. DL was Dean Lennox. RH was Ray Holt, her father. "Where?" she asked. Walter gripped the back of the steel chair. "The old cistern, under the access house. There were 2. The one you found was for distribution. The original holding tank is farther west, under the collapsed windmill." "Who fired the shot?" "Lennox." "What did my father do?" Walter looked at her with exhausted pity. "He helped, same as me." Mara stepped backward until she reached the wall. Ethan opened the envelope addressed to his mother, despite the agent's objection. Inside was a 6-page confession written in 2007. Walter described Thomas confronting him at the North Pump. Thomas demanded money and threatened to expose Lennox. Walter called the sheriff. Lennox arrived with Ray Holt. The argument became violent. Thomas struck Lennox with a wrench. Lennox drew his service pistol and shot Thomas in the chest. Thomas was still alive. According to Walter, Ray wanted to call an ambulance. Lennox refused. He said Thomas would destroy all of them. For 20 minutes, the 3 men watched Thomas bleed beside the pump while he begged for help. Then Lennox shot him a second time. They placed his body in the dry cistern and covered the opening with concrete debris. Ray moved Thomas's truck. Walter planted stolen tools inside it. Lennox wrote the report. Ethan lowered the pages. You let my mother believe Kearns ran away. Walter looked older beneath the fluorescent lights than he had at the farm. I told her enough to make her leave. You told her you were involved in crime. I told her I was not a man she should trust. That was the one honest thing you did. The facility lights went out. Emergency lamps glowed red along the hallway. A fire alarm began to pulse, not ring, casting slow flashes across the unit. Mara drew her weapon. The state agent called security and received no response. From somewhere outside the unit came the scrape of a shoe. The door slammed shut. Ethan grabbed it, but the handle would not turn. A metal object had been dropped through the exterior latch. Smoke curled beneath the door. Mara fired 2 rounds into the lock. The steel dented, but held. The agent used a pry bar from an emergency cabinet, while Ethan wrapped his jacket around the notebooks and tapes. The smoke thickened. Walter began coughing. Then the wall behind the storage unit moved. A rectangle of drywall tipped inward. A man in a respirator and dark coveralls stepped through from the neighboring unit. He carried a pistol in one hand and a plastic fuel can in the other. For one instant, Ethan thought it was Benjamin. The man removed the respirator. It was Curtis Vale, Clay Lennox's operations manager. Give me the box, he said. Chapter 11, Unit 311. Curtis Vale kept the pistol low, pointed at Walter's stomach. Toolbox, he said. Slide it over. Mara stood nearest to him, but the narrow unit offered no safe angle. The state agent was half hidden by smoke near the door, still forcing the pry bar into the damaged latch. Ethan held the notebooks against his chest, beneath his jacket. The building is recorded, Mara said. Every entrance, every hallway. Cameras went down 7 minutes ago. Then your face is the last thing they recorded. Curtis's eyes flicked toward the ceiling. He had not considered that, or he had and disliked being reminded. I do not need to walk out clean. I need the records gone. Clay send you? Ethan asked. Clay does not know I am here. It sounded like a lie, designed to protect a man who would never protect him. Smoke thickened around their knees. The fuel can in Curtis's hand was half empty. He had poured an accelerant into the neighboring unit and set a small fire near the ventilation duct, enough to trigger evacuation and create confusion. If the flames spread through the drywall, the notebooks would burn whether he obtained them or not. Walter moved before anyone expected him to. He swung the steel chair into Curtis's arm. The pistol fired. The sound inside the storage unit was enormous. Walter fell backward. Curtis staggered against the cut wall, his weapon hand trapped between the chair and a stud. Mara lunged. A second figure, dropped from the open ceiling grid behind Curtis. He wore no scarecrow coat, only dark work clothes and a painter's respirator. Ethan recognized the long nose and the scar through the left eyebrow from Benjamin Kearns's license photograph. Benjamin looped a length of wire around Curtis's throat and pulled. Curtis fired into the ceiling. Mara struck his wrist. The pistol fell beneath the chair. Benjamin dragged Curtis backward through the broken wall with astonishing speed, disappearing into the smoke of the neighboring unit. Mara started after them. Then Walter made a wet, choking sound. Blood spread across the old man's shirt near his right side. "Stay with him," she ordered Ethan. The agent finally tore the latch free. Fresh air entered from the corridor. Sprinklers began hammering water against the ceiling, flattening the smoke and turning dust to gray paste. Ethan knelt beside Walter. The bullet had entered below the ribs and passed through the soft flesh of his side. The wound bled heavily, but did not pulse. Ethan pressed folded cloth against it, while Walter gripped his wrist. "The tapes," Walter whispered. "Forget the tapes. One has him." "Who?" "Lennox." Mara returned with her weapon raised. They went through the adjacent unit and into the maintenance corridor. Curtis is down. Kearns is gone. Curtis had survived. Benjamin had tightened the wire until he lost consciousness, then left him beside the burning fuel can. Security officers pulled him out before the fire reached the wall. He was transported under guard with a crushed windpipe, a fractured wrist, and a bullet wound from his own gun where Mara had deflected it into his thigh. Walter's injury was less severe than it first appeared. The bullet missed his liver and kidney, passing through muscle. At the hospital, surgeons controlled the bleeding and admitted him under police watch. Only after the fire department cleared the storage unit did investigators inventory the evidence. One cassette was missing. The label on the empty space in the toolbox read, "June 21 pump." Benjamin had not come to destroy the evidence. He had come to take the recording of the night his father died. Curtis refused to answer questions until Clay Lennox's attorney arrived. The attorney claimed Curtis had acted alone after learning the notebooks might falsely implicate the company. No one explained how he knew the unit number, how he disabled the cameras, or why Clay's white pickup had followed Ethan earlier. Mara sat with Ethan in the hospital cafeteria at 3 in the morning. Her bandage had loosened above her ear. Smoke stained the collar of her uniform. "Benjamin saved us," Ethan said. "He saved the tape. We happened to be in the same room. He could have shot Curtis. He nearly strangled him, but he did not kill him." Mara looked at Ethan across the plastic table. "Do not build a moral system around the fact that a violent man has not murdered the person you saw him attack. We found a missing woman's license in his bunker. Maybe Curtis was responsible for her too. Maybe that is why evidence matters. She rubbed her eyes. Your grandfather watched Thomas die. My father helped hide him. Benjamin has spent years turning himself into a weapon. Curtis tried to burn 4 people alive. There is no clean side to stand on. Ethan thought of the finger against the scarecrow's painted mouth. The pointing hand, the deliberate count. Why move closer, he asked. Why not take the tape months ago? He knew the house. He knew the tunnels. Because the tape was not at the house. Then why terrorize Walter? Mara looked toward the dark cafeteria windows. Maybe he wanted Walter to open the unit for him. He could have stolen the key. Then maybe opening the unit was not enough. Maybe he wants your grandfather to do something else. Ethan's phone vibrated. A message had arrived from Walter's number. Though the phone was sealed in an evidence bag at the hospital, the message contained an audio file 12 seconds long. Ethan played it. At first, there was only tape hiss. Then a younger Walter spoke, his voice clear despite the age of the recording. Thomas, put the wrench down. We can fix this. A man shouted in the background. A gun fired. Before the clip ended, another voice whispered close to the original recorder. You counted wrong. There were 4 men at the pump. Chapter 12, The Fourth Man. The recording changed the investigation. Walter's notebooks named 3 men, Walter, Dean Lennox, and Ray Holt. The voice on the tape claimed a 4th had been present. Benjamin had cut the excerpt before the speaker could be identified, if identification was possible at all. Mara ordered the hospital floor locked down. Officers checked vents, stairwells, service rooms, and the roof. Walter's room had no exterior access. His phone remained inside a sealed bag in a patrol car, yet someone had used its number through a spoofing service. At daylight, Ethan drove to the state police office, where a forensic technician copied the audio. The hiss contained low mechanical pulses, consistent with an idling diesel engine. Beneath the gunshot, another sound appeared, a door slamming, followed by 4 rapid electronic beeps. Vehicle warning chime, the technician said. Late 90s, maybe. Hard to narrow. The whispered statement had been added recently. Benjamin had played the old tape near a digital recorder and spoken over it. He wants us to ask who the 4th man was, Ethan said. Mara stood behind him. Or he wants one person to know that he remembers. Walter came out of surgery, confused from anesthesia. He denied a 4th man until Mara played the message. His heart rate rose sharply enough for the monitor to alarm. Who was there? She asked. Walter looked toward the hospital door. No one. Benjamin knows. Benjamin was a child, 14, old enough to follow his father. Walter closed his eyes. Ethan understood before Mara said it. Benjamin was the 4th. Walter's face provided the answer. On June 21, 1999, Benjamin had hidden in the bed of Thomas's pickup. He knew his father planned to confront Walter and Sheriff Lennox. Thomas had told him to stay home, but the boy believed his father might leave the county without him. He followed. When Thomas entered the pump house, Benjamin climbed from the truck and watched through a broken vent. He saw the first shot. He saw Ray Holt argue with Lennox. He saw Walter take the wrench from his father's hand. Then fear drove him into the corn. Did he see the second shot? Mara asked. I do not know, Walter said. Did you know he was there? We found tracks, small shoes. Lennox said Thomas must have brought the boy. What did you do? We searched until morning. To help him, Walter turned his face toward the wall. To find him before he talked. The room fell silent, except for the monitor. Benjamin survived the night beneath a broken grain wagon near the rail bed. He returned home before dawn and told his mother pieces of what he had seen. Angela went to the sheriff's office. Dean Lennox convinced her that Thomas had fled after shooting at him, and that Benjamin, frightened and confused, had mixed a nightmare with distant sounds. Ray Holt supported the story. My father interviewed him, Mara asked. Walter nodded. Did my father threaten them? Lennox did. Ray sat in the room. Mara stepped away from the bed. Ethan followed her into the hallway. She stood beside a vending machine, breathing slowly through her nose. You did not know, he said. That does not change what he did. It changes what you did. Does it? I joined the same office. Wore his old badge number. Every time someone said Lennox ran the county like a private business, I defended my father because he served under him and came home for dinner. I thought familiarity was evidence. You were his daughter, not his investigator. She looked at Ethan. Benjamin was somebody's son too. That afternoon, Ethan opened Walter's letter to Laura in an interview room. The letter did not merely confess. It tried to explain why Walter had chosen silence year after year. First, he feared Lennox. Then he feared prison. After Lennox died, he feared destroying Ray's family, Clay's business, and Laura's memory of her childhood. Each year added a new reason that sounded less convincing than the last. Near the end, Walter wrote that Laura had seen blood on his truck the morning after Thomas disappeared. She was 23 and preparing to move to Wichita. He told her he had struck a deer. She did not believe him. Their final argument began with that lie. I think you knew I helped something terrible happen, Walter had written. You did not know what, and I was too much of a coward to give you the shape of it. You left because the house felt wrong. You were right. Ethan folded the pages. His mother had never described the farm as wrong. She called it exhausting, backward, and full of silence. She visited only when Ethan begged. She never stayed after sunset. A state investigator entered carrying a report from Missouri. The missing woman whose license had been found underground was named Allison Greer. Her body had never been recovered. She had worked as an office manager for the contractor whose attic Benjamin entered. Months before disappearing, She accused the contractor of payroll fraud, then withdrew the allegation. Benjamin had contacted her twice. He believed she knew where the contractor hid records, the investigator said. Her sister says Allison was terrified of someone living in the crawlspace. Police searched and found nothing. Ethan felt the story narrowing around them. Benjamin did not simply punish liars. He selected people who held evidence, entered the spaces around their lives, and applied fear until they revealed it. Sometimes they survived. Sometimes they disappeared. Walter had not been the first scarecrow. He was only the largest confession Benjamin had ever tried to force. Chapter 13. The Dry Cistern. Excavators reached the original holding tank the next morning. The collapsed windmill stood 200 yards west of the tunnel chamber, its tower folded into brush. Ground radar revealed a circular void beneath slabs of broken concrete. State technicians removed the debris layer by layer, while photographers documented each position. At 11:16, they found human bone. Ethan watched from behind the perimeter with Walter's letter in his pocket. Mara stood closer in protective clothing, speaking with the forensic anthropologist. The remains lay curled at the bottom of the dry tank beneath a rotted tarp. Work boots remained on the feet. A corroded belt buckle bore the initials TK. 2 bullet defects marked the ribs and spine. Thomas Kearns had never left the farm. News vehicles arrived by noon. Reporters parked along the county road and filmed the house, the corn, the bare scarecrow cross. Clay Lennox issued a written statement expressing shock and condemning the alleged actions of his late father. He claimed no knowledge of illegal payments or the attempted destruction of evidence. Curtis Vale remained hospitalized under guard and refused to cooperate. Mara obtained warrants for Clay's home, offices, and transport yard. Investigators recovered financial records tying his company to accounts opened by Dean Lennox, but nothing yet connected Clay to Thomas's death. The white pickup contained bolt cutters, brown wool fibers, and aerial maps of Walter's farm. Curtis could argue they were work materials. He could not explain traces of accelerant matching the storage fire. Benjamin left no message that day. The absence made Ethan more uneasy than the Count. He returned to the farm under escort to collect clothes for Walter. The house had been processed and released, but yellow tape still crossed the basement stairs. Without Walter inside, the rooms seemed to relax. Floorboards creaked in ordinary ways. The refrigerator hummed. Sunlight exposed dust rather than movement. Ethan entered his mother's bedroom and opened the window. From there, he could see the excavators, the access house, and the path he had walked on his first night. 86 steps to the field, 60 the next morning, 42 when the thermal camera found a living chest, 19 beside the coal chute, 12 in the garden. The sequence was not random. He wrote the numbers on the back of an envelope and looked for a pattern. differences of 26, 18, 23, 7. No clean progression. No having. No dates he recognized. Then he measured the old floor plan hanging in Walter's office. The north wall of the house was 86 feet from the first drainage junction on the original irrigation map. The next junction was 60 feet. The chamber beneath the access house lay 42 feet from a feeder split. 19 feet separated the coal chute from the basement wall. 12 feet separated the porch from the garden. Benjamin had not been counting steps. He had been marking the route through the tunnels. Each position of the scarecrow stood above a point where he could emerge or observe. Ethan compared the final number written on Benjamin's ruler. 12. There was no number below it, but a dark line extended to the ruler's edge. He went to the basement. The patched coal chute had been opened and sealed with an evidence panel. Ethan shone a light through the clear plastic. The conduit led north, but on the old floor plan, a second line ran east beneath the foundation. It had been labeled service drain and crossed under the stairs toward the kitchen. Agents had assumed it was filled. Ethan called Mara. While waiting, he inspected the floor beneath the kitchen pantry. One tile sounded hollow. He removed it with a screwdriver and found a square iron plate fitted flush with the subfloor. A ring handle lay, folded into a recess. He did not lift it. Mara arrived with 2 technicians. Beneath the plate was a vertical shaft barely wide enough for a man, fitted with iron rungs. It descended 8 feet to a dry service drain that ran beneath the house and ended below Walter's bedroom. The chamber at the end contained a chair, empty water bottles, and a battery-powered listening device connected to thin microphones drilled through the floorboards. Benjamin had spent nights beneath Walter's bed. On the wall, he had written every word Walter spoke in his sleep. Most were fragments. Laura, pump, Dean, don't shoot. A few were full sentences. One line had been underlined repeatedly. I should have pulled HIM out before the concrete. Thomas was alive when they put him in the cistern, Ethan said. Mara read the line and did not answer. A forensic examination would later show that one bullet had damaged Thomas's lung, but might not have killed him immediately. The second struck his spine. Whether he remained alive during burial could not be established. At the bottom of the wall, Benjamin had written a final note. He will say it where my father can hear. Beneath the sentence was a drawing of the dry cistern and a small square beside it. A speaker. Chapter 14. The people in the walls. State police built a profile of Benjamin from the rooms he left behind. He chose structures with unused space, crawl spaces, attics, service tunnels, abandoned ducts, wall cavities. He studied building plans when available and made his own when they were not. He watched targets for months, learned their routines, then entered gradually. At first, he moved objects by inches. Later, he left proof of access. The victim's belief that home was safe eroded before Benjamin ever showed himself. The scarecrow was specific to Walter, but the method was not. In Joplin, the contractor found wet footprints in an attic with no exterior access. In Tulsa, a warehouse manager reported hearing breathing through an office vent after refusing to testify in a theft case. In western Missouri, Allison Greer told her sister that a coat in her hallway stood closer to the bedroom every morning. Allison disappeared 11 days later. Mara interviewed the surviving targets while Ethan remained at the hospital with Walter. Their accounts arrived in fragments through phone calls and case summaries. Benjamin rarely spoke. When he did, he asked for a place, a key, a document, or a name. His violence escalated when people lied. One man woke to find Benjamin sitting beside his bed, wearing clothes taken from the man's dead father. Another received measurements of the distance between his children's rooms and the back door. A third found a mannequin assembled inside a locked supply closet, holding photographs of a hit-and-run victim. Benjamin had appointed himself an investigator without law, a judge without limits, and an executioner whenever evidence failed to satisfy him. Walter listened while Ethan read one report aloud. "You think telling me this makes me less guilty?" Walter asked. "No." "Then why?" "Because you still talk about him as if he is only Thomas's son. He is not the boy in the truck anymore." Walter shifted painfully against the hospital pillows. A man becomes what is done to him. That is another excuse. Not for him, for me. Ethan set the report aside. "You always have a reason that sounds like responsibility after you waited long enough." Walter looked out the window. 2 officers stood in the hall. The blinds were closed. His room had been moved away from exterior walls and ventilation access. Meals arrived sealed. Every employee entering was checked. "He wants me at the cistern," Walter said. "We know." "Then take me, so he can kill you, so I can say what happened. You can say it here, on camera, in court. He wants his father to hear. His father is dead." Walter turned back. That has never stopped the dead from hearing anything in this family. Ethan left before anger made him cruel. In the corridor, Mara waited with 2 coffees. She handed him one and said Clay Lennox had been arrested for obstruction and conspiracy related to the storage fire. Curtis's phone records showed 11 calls between them that day. One text from Clay read, "IF Cole OPENSIT. Nothing leaves the building." Clay claims he meant legal documents, Mara said. Of course, Curtis has started negotiating. He says Clay ordered him to retrieve the notebooks, but never told him to start a fire. Will it hold? Enough to hold Clay while we search. Not enough to convict him for everything his father did. She drank from her cup. Curtis also says Benjamin approached him 3 weeks ago, offered evidence that Walter had stolen from Dean Lennox. Curtis tried to follow him and lost him on the rail bed. That is why the pickup watched the farm. So Clay knew Benjamin was here. He knew someone was pressuring Walter and believed records might surface. He watched instead of reporting it. And the fourth man, Benjamin, was there, as Walter said. But the audio team found another voice beneath the first gunshot. A woman. Ethan looked at her. "One word," Mara said. "She says Ben." Angela Kearns had followed her son. Walter admitted it when confronted. Angela reached the pump after the first shot, found Benjamin in the corn, and tried to take him home. Lennox stopped her. He threatened to arrest her as an accomplice to Thomas's blackmail and take Benjamin into state custody. Ray Holt escorted them away, while Walter and Lennox remained with Thomas. "Why hide that?" Ethan asked Walter. "Because Angela made a deal. She agreed to say Benjamin had been home all night. In return, Lennox would not charge Thomas publicly with armed assault and would allow her to sell the house before rumors destroyed its value. She believed Thomas might still be alive when she left. Later, when Lennox said he had fled, she clung to the possibility because the alternative meant she had walked away from him. "Benjamin thinks she betrayed his father," Mara said. "Her medical records show she died in 2010. He returned here in 2012, the same year my father checked out the Kearns file. Maybe he met your father. Maybe my father gave him something." That evening, the state lab called. A fingerprint inside the old report box from Ray Holt's garage matched Benjamin. Ray had possessed the file. Benjamin had touched it. The contents were still missing. At 9:14 p.m., a nurse entered Walter's room carrying a tray. The hallway officers checked her badge and sealed meal containers. She had worked at the hospital for 6 years. Nothing appeared wrong. Under Walter's soup bowl, he found a strip of orange survey string. It was 1 inch long. Chapter 15, 1. The nurse had no idea how the string reached the tray. Security footage showed the meal assembled in the kitchen, placed on a cart, and transported by elevator. For 7 seconds, the cart passed through a blind corner where a fire door blocked the camera. No person appeared before or after. A maintenance hatch opened into the ceiling above that corner. Police searched the hospital roof and service floors. They found a stolen uniform, a coil of climbing rope, and a respirator in an air handling room. Benjamin was gone. 1 inch of string meant 1 step. Mara moved Walter to a state police safe house under a false transfer order. Only 6 people knew the address. Mara, 2 state investigators, the driver, Ethan, and the regional commander. Walter traveled in an ambulance that switched places with another vehicle inside a secured garage. The safe house was a brick ranch outside Salina with barred basement windows and no crawl space. Police inspected the attic, ducts, walls, sewer connection, and utility boxes. Motion sensors covered the yard, An officer remained in each room. For 48 hours, nothing happened. Ethan slept on a sofa near Walter's bedroom. He woke at every plumbing knock and change in the refrigerator's hum. Walter spent most of the time recording a formal statement. He described the cache, the shooting, the burial, and the cover-up in slow detail. When asked why he stayed silent after Lennox and Ray died, he said, "Because cowardice becomes habit before a man notices he is practicing it." On the second night, Walter asked Ethan to turn off the recorder. "There is something I did not put in the notebooks," he said. "Tell Mara. I am telling you first." Ethan left the recorder running. Walter noticed, but continued. After Thomas was buried, Walter returned alone to the cistern 2 days later. He intended to move the body before Lennox poured concrete over the opening. At the bottom, he found Thomas's coat caught beneath a slab and heard a sound from under the tarp. "What sound?" Ethan asked. "Scratching." The word seemed to reduce the room's air. "Was he alive?" "I do not know. Rats get into everything. Concrete settles. A dying mind hears what it deserves." "Did you climb down?" Walter's eyes filled, but he did not look away. "No." He replaced the slab and left. The next morning, Lennox brought a mixer and filled the upper section with construction debris. Walter stood beside him and never mentioned the sound. "That is what you say in your sleep," Ethan said. "You should have pulled him out." "Yes." "Benjamin heard you." "Yes." "Does he know the whole thing?" "He knows enough." An officer opened the bedroom door. "Deputy Holt needs you in the kitchen." Mara stood beside a laptop displaying live video from Walter's farm. State police had left cameras around the cistern excavation and tunnel entrances. One feed showed movement near the old windmill. A scarecrow stood at the edge of the open cistern. It wore the brown coat from the first night. A speaker was tied to its chest. In one hand, it held a length of orange string. In the other, it held the missing cassette. A digital clock hung around its neck, counting down from 06, 0, 0, 0, 0. 6 hours, Ethan said. "Until what?" Walter asked from the doorway. The speaker crackled. Benjamin's voice came through the safe house laptop, carried by the camera microphone at the farm. "Until the county hears him." The scarecrow turned its sack face toward the camera. "Bring Walter to the cistern before sunrise. He will tell the truth into the hole. Every word. If police enter the field first, the tape goes to the press with the names of everyone who helped Lennox. If Walter does not come, another recording goes out." Mara leaned toward the microphone. "Benjamin, this is Deputy Holt. We recovered the notebooks. The truth is already documented, not the scratching." Walter gripped the door frame. Benjamin continued, "Not the part where he came back and left my father alive under concrete. We can arrange a recorded statement," Mara said. "You do not need Walter at the site. My father waited there. Walter can wait there too." The feed went silent. The clock continued counting. "It is a trap," Ethan said. "Yes," Mara replied. Walter walked toward the laptop. "Then use it." They developed a plan. A tactical team would approach through the irrigation conduit, while Walter and Ethan drove openly to the farm with Mara. A drone would monitor the field from high altitude. Marksmen would position beyond the rail bed. The public would be kept away under an emergency road closure. At 3:20 a.m., the convoy left the safe house. At 3:41, the ambulance carrying a decoy Walter lost tire pressure on Interstate 70. Investigators found roofing nails scattered across the lane. At 3:47, the lead tactical vehicle received a false dispatch reporting an officer shot 20 miles north. The message used the regional commander's authorization code. At 4:02, every camera at Walter's farm went dark. Someone knew the plan. Mara ordered all vehicles to stop at a highway maintenance station. She called the 6 people who had known the safe house address. 5 answered. The safe house driver did not. His name was Daniel Price. He had served under Ray Holt and retired from the sheriff's office 6 years earlier. Investigators found him unconscious in his garage, drugged and bound. His phone and uniform were missing. Benjamin had not learned the address from a traitor. He had become one of the 6. Mara called the safe house. No officer answered. They turned back at once. The front door stood open when they arrived. 2 officers lay inside, alive, but sedated with injections delivered through gaps in their protective vests. The third had a fractured skull, but was breathing. Walter's bedroom was empty. On the bed lay the brown scarecrow coat. Ethan's phone rang from an unknown number. Benjamin spoke without disguise. One step was too generous. Behind his voice, Ethan heard an engine and Walter coughing. "Where are you taking him?" "Back to 0. Chapter 16, 0. Mara traced the call to a prepaid phone, moving west on County Road 4. The signal vanished after 3 minutes, but it gave them a direction. Ethan rode with her, while state units spread across the roads around the farm. Dawn was still an hour away. The headlights showed empty pavement, drainage signs, and fields flattened into darkness. Ethan replayed Benjamin's call. Beneath Walter's cough, an engine ran with a loose belt. Every few seconds came a hollow impact, followed by a metallic rattle. "Cattle guard," Mara said. He crossed one. There were 4 on the west roads. 2 led to occupied ranches. 1 led to an abandoned seed facility. The last crossed the old rail bed half a mile north of Walter's land. They found the stolen state vehicle there, with both doors open. Walter's blood marked the passenger seat, though not enough to suggest another gunshot. Tire tracks from a smaller vehicle continued along the rail bed and disappeared where gravel became packed soil. Benjamin had transferred Walter into a utility cart or farm vehicle capable of using the narrow path. Mara stopped Ethan before he entered the brush. You stay with the vehicle. He took Walter because of me. He took Walter because Walter helped murder his father. He called my phone because he wants you moving where he chooses. Ethan looked toward the dark line of the north field. He has been choosing since I arrived. A tactical team approached from the south. Their radio failed within a quarter-mile of the farm. Benjamin had placed transmitters along the rail bed that flooded police frequencies with noise. The team switched to hand signals and a separate encrypted channel, but coordination slowed. A flare rose over the corn. It burned red above the field, revealing the access house, the broken windmill, and the scarecrow beside the open cistern. The speaker on its chest began playing the old cassette at full volume. Thomas Kearns shouted through 27 years of hiss. Walter's younger voice answered. Lennox cursed. A woman called Benjamin's name. Then came the first gunshot. The recording rolled across the fields like a memory too large for the land that held it. He wants everyone looking at the cistern, Mara said, which means Walter is somewhere else. Ethan studied the field. The brown coat hung on the scarecrow, but the cross beneath it leaned unnaturally. A cable ran from the figure to the ground. It was a speaker rig, not a person. A second flare rose from the east, near the pump house, where Thomas had first been shot. In its light, Ethan saw Walter tied to a chair. Benjamin stood behind him, wearing a sack mask with no painted mouth. The number 0 was written across its forehead. Chapter 17, The Confession. Benjamin had placed Walter inside the ruined pump house, 3 walls of corrugated metal around a concrete pad. A camera faced the chair. Wires ran to work lights, speakers, and a transmitter mounted on the roof. Police could see him. They could not approach without crossing open ground. You brought the whole county, Benjamin said through the field speaker. That is good. Mara used a vehicle loudspeaker from behind the windbreak. Release Walter and come out unarmed. The recording has been preserved. Thomas's remains have been recovered. Benjamin rested one hand on Walter's shoulder. In the other, he held a revolver. He came back 2 days later, Benjamin said. Ask him why. Mara looked at Ethan, then raised the microphone. Walter has given a statement about hearing a sound from the cistern. A sound. Benjamin removed the sack mask. His face was narrow and deeply lined. The scar above his eyebrow had widened with age, pulling one side upward. He looked less like Thomas than the old photograph had promised. But Ethan recognized the shoulders Walter had recognized in the field. My father scratched until his nails broke, Benjamin said. Ray Holt photographed the marks. Walter saw the pictures in the case file. Mara's composure shifted. Where is that file? Your father gave it to me. Why? Because dying makes cowards interested in balance. He told me where they put my father. He gave me the photographs and asked me not to hurt you. You attacked me underground. I did not kill you. That is not mercy." Benjamin smiled without humor. "It is the kind I learned from him." He pressed the revolver against Walter's neck and switched on the camera. A red light appeared. "Tell him," Benjamin said. Walter looked toward the open field. His voice came through the speakers, weak at first. "Thomas was alive when we put him in the cistern." Ethan heard officers moving behind him, preparing a route through the feeder conduit. Benjamin would expect it. Every tunnel might hold another flash charge, a tripwire, or a collapsing section. Walter continued. "Lennox shot him twice. Ray and I carried him. I knew he was breathing. I told myself it would stop before we reached the tank. It did not." Benjamin's jaw tightened. 2 days later, I went back," Walter said. "I heard him under the tarp. I could have moved the slab. I did not. I was afraid Lennox would kill me too. I left your father there. Say my name. Benjamin Cairns. Tell me what you took from him. His life, his name, his chance to be found. Your mother spent years wondering whether he abandoned you. You spent years knowing he did not." The first pale line of sunrise touched the horizon. Benjamin's eyes filled with tears, but his gun remained steady. "And what do you deserve?" Walter answered without hesitation. "Whatever comes." That is not an answer. Prison, shame. To have Thomas's name spoken every time mine is, but not a clean death in a field. That would let me stop too soon. For the first time, Benjamin appeared uncertain. Ethan understood Walter had found the only response Benjamin had not prepared to punish. Not denial, not excuse, not a plea. A sentence that accepted survival as part of consequence. Then a shot came from the rail bed. The bullet struck the pump house roof. Benjamin pulled Walter from the chair and fired toward the sound. Officers shouted. Another shot hit the work light, plunging the structure into shadow. "Police did not fire," Mara said. A white pickup burst from behind the windbreak. Clay Lennox was driving. Chapter 18. What the Sons Inherited. Clay had been released from county custody 40 minutes earlier, after a judge rejected the emergency conspiracy hold. His attorney drove him to the transport yard, where Clay took a company pickup before state police could serve the new warrant. He came to destroy the tape his father feared, and he came armed. The white pickup crossed the field, crushing corn beneath its tires. Clay fired through the open window toward the pump house. Benjamin dragged Walter behind the concrete base and returned fire. Mara ordered officers to engage. A marksman's shot shattered the pickup's front tire. The vehicle swerved, struck an irrigation pipe, and rolled onto its side less than 30 yards from the pump house. Clay crawled through the broken windshield with blood across his face. He still held the rifle. Ethan ran before Mara could stop him. The corn swallowed the police line. He followed the track crushed by the pickup, bent low as shots cracked ahead. Leaves cut his cheeks. Smoke began spreading from the vehicle, where leaking fuel touched the hot engine. At the pump house, Walter lay behind the concrete, footing with his wrists bound. Ethan reached him and cut the cord with a pocket knife. "Where is Benjamin?" Walter pointed toward the cistern. Clay had fled in the same direction. Benjamin followed, carrying the cassette and revolver. The Scarecrow speaker continued playing the final minutes of Thomas's recording. On the tape, Ray Holt begged Lennox to call an ambulance. Lennox ordered him to move the truck. Walter said nothing. Ethan and Walter crossed the field as police closed from both sides. The overturned pickup ignited behind them. Flame climbed the dry outer leaves, moving in a narrow line with the wind. Near the cistern, Clay caught Benjamin from behind and struck him with the rifle stock. The cassette fell beside the open pit. Clay kicked it toward the fire. Benjamin fired from the ground. The bullet entered Clay's shoulder. Clay dropped the rifle, but fell on Benjamin, both men rolling against the concrete debris at the cistern's rim. Walter reached them first. He picked up the rifle. Clay froze. Benjamin did not. He clawed for the revolver in the dirt. "Leave it," Walter said. Benjamin looked up. "You left him." "I know." "Then finish something." Walter aimed the rifle at him. For a terrible second, Ethan believed he would fire. It would be easy to call it defense. Easy to end the witness, the stalker, and the son who carried every detail of Walter's guilt. Walter turned the rifle and threw it into the cistern. Clay lunged for the revolver. Mara fired once from the corn. The bullet struck Clay's arm, spinning him away from the weapon. Officers reached him and forced him face down. Benjamin rose with a knife Ethan had not seen. He seized Walter by the collar and pulled him toward the cistern. "He goes where my father went," Benjamin said. Ethan caught Benjamin's wrist. The two men struggled on loose concrete. Benjamin was stronger than his thin frame suggested, his muscles shaped by climbing and confined spaces. He drove his forehead into Ethan's face. Light burst behind Ethan's eyes. Walter grabbed Benjamin around the waist. All three slipped. Ethan landed on the rim with one arm over the opening. Benjamin hung below him, one hand gripping Ethan's sleeve. Walter lay farther back, holding Ethan's belt. At the bottom of the cistern, Thomas's empty burial place waited among broken slabs. Benjamin looked down, then up at Ethan. "Let me go," he said. It was not a plea. It was an instruction. Ethan tightened his grip. "No, he let my father die, and you will live long enough to answer for everyone you hurt." Benjamin tried to cut the sleeve, but Mara reached the rim and stamped the knife from his hand. Officers pulled him out, bound his wrists, and carried him away from the spreading fire. He did not resist after that. As they passed the Scarecrow, the old tape reached its end. Thomas's last clear words came through the speaker. "Ben is waiting for me." The cassette clicked off. Chapter 19. The Distance After. Rain stopped the field fire before it reached the house. By noon, the North Acres were black and smoking. The Scarecrow cross remained standing near the cistern, stripped of its coat. Investigators collected the cassette, camera, weapons, and transmitters. Thomas's recording had streamed to 3 news stations and hundreds of private addresses before police disabled Benjamin's system. By evening, the county could no longer hide behind rumor. Clay Lennox survived his wounds. Curtis Vale accepted a plea agreement and testified that Clay ordered the destruction of Walter's records. Financial investigators uncovered contracts, shell companies, and property transfers that had carried Dean Lennox's money into his son's business. Walter was charged with conspiracy, evidence tampering, obstruction, and unlawful disposal of human remains. Murder charges remained under review because of the years, the conflicting acts, and the question of when Thomas died. Walter waived bail and entered the county jail infirmary. He did not ask Ethan to defend him. Mara placed her father's badge, service weapon, and commendations in an evidence locker. Ray Holt's role became part of the reopened case. The report he gave Benjamin was recovered from a sealed drum in the underground chamber. It contained photographs of scratches beneath the cistern slab and a statement Ray wrote before his death. He had known Thomas was alive during burial. He had done nothing. Benjamin faced kidnapping, stalking, burglary, assault, weapons charges, and possible charges connected to Allison Greer. Under questioning, he gave investigators coordinates in Missouri. Searchers found Allison's remains beneath the floor of an abandoned workshop. Benjamin claimed she died during a struggle after refusing to reveal financial records. Evidence suggested he had confined her there for days. There was no version of him left that could be mistaken for a hero. 3 months later, Ethan returned to the farm to prepare it for sale. The corn had been cut. The tunnels were filled with controlled grout, the coal chute sealed, the service drain destroyed. Sunlight entered every building investigators had opened. Ethan walked from the porch to the place where the first scarecrow had stood. 86 steps. He followed the path backward. 60, 42, 19, 12, 1. At 0, he stood inside the house, beside Walter's empty chair. For years, his mother had understood what he only now learned. Distance was not safety when silence connected every room. Walter had believed the crime stayed in the field because concrete covered the body. Ray believed retirement ended his part. Angela believed leaving the county might let Benjamin forget. Each of them measured distance in miles and years. While the truth moved closer through whatever space they refused to examine. Ethan took his mother's medals from the upstairs wall. He left Walter's belongings for the estate crew. Before locking the house, he opened every curtain, Chapter 20. No Scarecrow. Benjamin Kearns pleaded guilty the following spring. He refused to discuss the scarecrows in court. When the prosecutor displayed photographs of the figures, he looked past them toward Walter. Walter sat in a wheelchair at the defense table, thinner after 7 months in custody. Neither man spoke to the other. Walter received 12 years, a sentence he was unlikely to survive. Clay received 21. Curtis received 9. Benjamin received life with the possibility of review only after 40 years. Thomas Kearns was buried beside Angela in Missouri. His headstone carried no accusation, only his name and the years he had been missing from the world. Ethan attended from a distance. Mara stood near the grave with her hands folded. Neither approached Benjamin's relatives. Some losses did not become shared simply because the facts were finally public. After the service, Ethan drove to Wichita. At his apartment, he found a padded envelope forwarded from the county evidence office. It contained the small wooden ruler recovered underground. The prosecutor had released it after trial, assuming it belonged to Walter. Ethan turned it beneath the kitchen light. The marked side showed 86, 60, 42, 19, and 12. The reverse side held another set of measurements, faint enough that investigators had photographed but not interpreted them. 24, 11, 6, 3. Ethan recognized the numbers only after he walked through his apartment. 24 steps from the building entrance to the stairwell. 11 from the stairwell to his door. 6 from the door to the living room window where Benjamin had photographed him. 3 from the window to the sofa. He called Mara. Police searched the building, the attic, basement, vents, and neighboring units. They found repaired screw holes inside a utility chase behind Ethan's wall. The holes were old. Benjamin had watched him there months before Walter made the first call. No one remained in the walls. There was no moving coat, no human heat, no painted face. Only evidence that a person had once been close enough to hear him breathe while he believed himself alone. That night, Ethan slept at a hotel. In the morning, he returned with a contractor and had the wall opened from floor to ceiling. He did not count the distance. He counted every empty space. Epilogue: the open wall. 6 months later, Ethan visited Walter once. The infirmary smelled of bleach. Walter sat behind glass with oxygen beneath his nose. He asked whether the farm had sold. Ethan said a family had bought it and planned to tear down the house. Good, Walter said. Ethan touched glass. Did you know Benjamin watched me? Walter shook his head. The answer no longer mattered as much as it once had. Before the guard ended the visit, Walter said, "Your mother used to count thunder. She thought knowing the distance made storms smaller." Ethan remembered lying beside her as a child, waiting between lightning and sound. It only tells you if it is coming closer, he said. Walter lowered his eyes. Outside, rain crossed the prison fields. Ethan waited beneath the entrance canopy until thunder rolled overhead. He did not count. He listened until it passed, then walked to his car without looking back.